The shows were great, yeah. I enjoyed the Tokyo one the best, I think. It was kind of, just the energy was kind of amazing. And the fact that it was the last night of the tour, I think that kind of like added some sort of like little special piquancy to the whole proceedings. But the Osaka show was amazing as well. I mean, it's just, it's always very special coming to Japan. It's always been, a really special place for me to play personally, and for Suede to play, and it's lovely to come back here. And it was great last night finishing the tour in Tokyo, an amazing audience, and a lot of love in the room. And it was the first time that Suede had played in Japan for 8 years or something like that, which is kind of quite a thing worth celebrating, I think. So it's nice. Yeah, the audience was amazing. It was kind of, very, very, very sort of physical reaction from the audience, and a lot of jumping around. And I really like to, I'm not the sort of musician that can just stand there and play to an audience and not get anything back from them. I need that energy. For me, a great live show is about the artist giving something and the audience giving something back, and that being this sort of like loop that kind of you feed off each other, and you kind of like, you increase the energy of the room. You're both working on it. It's not just the artist's job, it's not just the audience's job. You're both in it together. It's sort of like making love or something like that. It takes two people to give their energy. It's not one-way traffic. It's very much like that. And that's quite an interesting analogy, actually. I think I'll use that again. So yeah, it was fantastic. Well, I mean, quite obviously, at the moment, Suede is about playing old songs. It doesn't feel nostalgic to me. It feels quite contemporary, strangely enough, but we're still playing songs from the 90s. Brett Anderson is a solo artist. I've just made a new album called Black Rainbows, which I made this year. So you can't get more contemporary than that. And that, for me, is very, very important to my integrity as a person and as everything. If I was just jumping up and down, jumping on stage and playing songs from the 90s, I'd feel like I was cheating myself a little bit and letting myself down. And I need that kind of like that sort of sense that I'm making new music to sort of feel good about what I do, really, I suppose. So they kind of go quite comfortably hand in hand, I think, at the moment. I don't know what will happen when we start making new Suede records, because we're going to try and write a new album. And that'll kind of like, obviously, that'll take it to a new territory. I don't know where it's going to go after that. But at the moment, it's sort of like they go hand in hand quite well, I think. Who knows? I don't know what will happen with Black Rainbows, but if it's well received, that'll drag me somewhere, won't it? You sort of go where these sort of forces take you. I don't really know. I don't really have a very long-term plan about it. All I know is that I just want to carry on making music in one way or another. I'm excited about releasing Black Rainbows. I'm excited about playing with Suede. It's just, I think they feed off each other, and they don't necessarily have to exclude each other. Yeah, I loved working with Leo on Slow Attack, and I think he did an amazing job. And I learned to really trust him, which you need to be able to do with anyone you work with. That's virtually almost like the definition of working with someone, is being able to trust them and trust their judgment on things. And when we came to make Black Rainbows, I wanted to make a more guitar-based record. I wanted to make a more rock-based record. And I said to him that's what I wanted to do. And he suggested making it as an improvised record. And when he first said that, I was like, what? We can't do that. That's a joke. You can't make records like that. He said, no, you can. I've sort of. He's worked a lot with Brian Eno, doing lots of improvised sessions, and he sort of convinced me he convinced me to trust him, and I did trust him. And we did a 3-day session in January, with me, him playing guitar, a guy called Leopold Ross playing second guitar, and a drummer called Seb Rochford. And we just jammed for 3 days, basically. And we had hours and hours and hours of looped jams. And we took all these jams away, and then we cut them up and we edited them, and I wrote songs on top of them. And that's how Black Rainbows came about, really. And it was a very exciting way to work. I mean, there's no safety net working like that. You're kind of in the studio and forced to come up with something. So it's not like you've got demos prepared. It's not like you've got songs prepared. You've just got your own kind of like, all you've got is faith in your own ability. And that's quite a scary way to work, but it was a very exciting way to work. And I think it's necessary to work like that sometimes, to scare yourself and to do things differently. So that's what we did. Well, Leo Ross and Seb were both people that Leo Abrahams had worked with before, and he suggested using them. And again, it was kind of his call, because it was, you know, he'd done a similar session with they'd worked on, oh God, Bridget Fontaine, I think they worked with, where they'd done like sort of almost improvised studio sessions before together. And he just liked the way that Leo Ross played. I really like Leo Ross's guitar playing. It's pretty crazy. It's sort of, it's very, you know, he just basically sat in a little cubicle for 3 days and made strange noises. But some of it is just absolutely brilliant, you know. And Seb Rochford is kind of an amazing drummer. He's just this sort of like incredibly competent, inventive drummer. So, you know, I was 100% kind of convinced about the musicianship, and you can kind of hear the dynamics and the energy in the album. I think it's a very sort of live sounding, exciting sounding record, and that's a lot to do with the kind of quality of the musicians that were playing on it. The highlights on Black Rainbows for me, God, there's lots of songs that I love. I really love Unsung, the opening song. That's a very beautiful song for me, and personally quite an important song for me, quite an emotional song. Oh God, what else? I like The Exiles, This Must Be Where It Ends. There's lots of songs. You know, what I like about the record is that it feels like an album. That's one of the things I really like about it. It doesn't feel like sort of like a collection of random songs. It feels like it's got a mood, and I think that's really important with albums. Lots of my favourite albums, they establish a mood, and they kind of that's the mood, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes when records are too eclectic, it can just feel like it's like a compilation album. And lots of my favourite records, Nevermind the Bollocks, Music for Airports, these are all records that you put them on and you know that it establishes a kind of mood. And for me, Black Rainbows is like that in a different way. It's got a seam. It's got a kind of like a continuum to it, which I really like. And that's probably because it was made during the same session, you know, and that's important for me to have that sense that it feels like a record. Any interesting stories? I mean, that's it really. That is the story. You know, the way that we made it was I don't know if it's. I wouldn't say. I'm not sure if it's radical. I don't know of albums that have been made like that before. I might be completely wrong and deluding myself, but I thought it was quite a brave thing to do. It was certainly brave for me, just to go into a studio and and jam for 3 days and hope that an album came out of it. You know, that for me was kind of was revolutionary. You know, maybe bands do it like that. I don't know, but I've never done it like that. And that was the biggest story. And you know, trusting Leo that this was going to work. That was a huge leap of faith for me. You know, every album I've ever made before has always been very carefully prepared, very carefully demoed, very carefully written. So I've gone into the studio knowing exactly the kind of songs that are going to come out. And this time it was the opposite. It was blind faith. And that kind of gives it a sense of kind of restless urgency, I think. Well, the title is, it's a paradox, isn't it? I like paradoxes. like play on words. My last album title was called Slow Attack, and that's another paradox. Black Rainbows as well is a paradox. I don't know. It's one of those things. Do I want to kind of like explain exactly what I was thinking with Black Rainbows? Sometimes I think when you over-explain things, the magic's lost, and sometimes the interpretation of people is much more special than the meaning I can give to it. So I don't really want to sit and over-explain it to me. It had a personal context for me. Thank you. Yeah, I'm proud of it. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There is a concept behind the artwork. The concept was taken from painters like Caravaggio and Rembrandt and even Edouard Manet, who developed a technique called chiaroscuro, which is basically black background and skin highlighted against the black background, so that there's very, very distinct points of light on the painting, and then other periods, other kind of like big areas of darkness. So it was very much inspired by classical painting, and it was almost like a modernised version of that. Yes. I'm not sure if I can talk about what every song's about, because sometimes songs aren't about anything, and that's the beauty of them, because things being about something, that's the realm of journalism. That's what journalism is for. But art is something. Not every piece of art is about something. Unsung was written as I suppose, a reflection and a rumination on a very good friend of mine who died, and it was a very sort of sad kind of. It was written in quite a sad period of my life, where my friend had died and had left me. Had left this earth, and it was quite a sad, a very, very sad song, and I think you can kind of like hear a lot of the pain in the song. So whether it's about that or not, I don't know. I don't know what it's about. It's just that was the sort of the cloud of emotion that it was written under. Brittle Heart was kind of inspired by, I suppose there's a band called Faust, who were a kind of like band of the 70s that they kind of popularised krautrock along with people like Neu and Kraftwerk and stuff like that. And the groove was kind of supposed to be almost like a Faust groove. And when we first started jamming the album, we would play a couple of little songs, little snippets of songs, just to get the energy right, kind of thing, and to kind of get some inspiration. And Faust was one of the things we played. And also the other thing we played was Public Image Limited. For that, we played a song called Rise, and that was the kind of supposed to be the kind of like the template. No, it was never supposed to be a homage. It was just the kind of like that was the sort of feel, this rolling feel, and the groove to Brittle Heart came about. And then I wrote some lyrics that kind of suggested a song about weakness, about the beauty of weakness, and about how it's quite brave to show your vulnerability sometimes. And I suppose that's, if that's how I'd sum that song up. Crash About to Happen. Yeah, Crash About to Happen is a song kind of about people that are just, inevitably going to destroy themselves. I don't know. There's a million people in the world, isn't there? There's some of them are famous and some of them aren't famous, but you just know that their lives are going to end in disaster, one way or the other. It's this sort of like sad inevitability about it, and that's what the song's about. I suppose there's a little bit of autobiographical content in there, in the sense that I look back at parts of my life and see where I've kind of like gone off the rails. And a very, very first-hand experience of kind of like of sometimes when things go wrong. I Count the Times was the last song that we wrote for the album. It was a song that we had the music to, and I couldn't write anything to it, and we just had a session doing some overdubs in September, and I suddenly came up with the idea for it, and I came up with a new melody for it. And sometimes that can happen. You can have pieces of music hanging around for a while, and it just doesn't click, and then suddenly you just, that's it, yeah, got it now. It's happened with songs throughout my career, and it happened with this, and it suddenly, the song just suddenly appeared, and it's one of my favourite songs on the album. Actually, it's quite a kind of big anthemic song. It kind of works. The Exiles, yeah, that's interesting. The Exiles might be my favourite song on the album, along with Unsung, and that was another later song. I love the anger of it. I love the extremity, the kind of like the violence inherent in the words, and there's a lot of frustration in there, and there's a lot of sort of bitterness, but quite controlled bitterness. The melody was sort of inspired by bands like Interpol, and it had that kind of like that dark kind of like heart that some of those bands have. This Must Be Where It Ends is the odd track on the album, in that it wasn't written within the original band sessions. It's the only song on the album that was written outside those sessions, and I wrote it primarily with Leopold Ross. Leo Abrahams, when I was writing to the edits of all the tracks, he had to go off and make another album. In fact, he made an album with Carl Barat from the Libertines, and while he was doing that, I'd run out of ideas, and I said to Leo, I need to carry on writing, otherwise I'm going to kind of stall here. So he said, well, why don't you give Leo Ross a call and see if he wants to do some writing? And I gave Leo Ross a call, and he sent me some music, and that was one of the songs he sent me. This Must Be Where It Ends, and I wrote that song to it. And the song is about, it's a song about infidelity, and it's a song sort of based on a friend of mine. It's about those temptations. Actors is probably the most sort of Suede sounding song on the album. It's quite kind of up and rock in that sort of traditional Suede sense. It's almost got that kind of new generation-y sort of thing about it. I suppose it's not, but you know, in that sort of same sort of territory. And yeah, it's a great song to play live. So, you know, I'm not sure what it's about. Oh, the House of Numbers, that's another song I don't really know what it's about. In fact, I do know what it's about. It's about class. It's about, you know, being brought up as an Englishman. You're very, very conscious of class. And the song is almost a fictional kind of, fictional, not fictional. I mean, what is fiction and what's fact, you know what I mean? They're so interchangeable, you know. Sort of fiction is just sort of fact that hasn't happened yet, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And it's a song about someone being brought into sort of like into a class that they're not born into, if you see what I mean. You know, it's about kind of like class contrast and people kind of like, you know, not quite fitting in. Thin Men Dancing is just this sort of stomping 70s kind of rock riff thing that we wrote. It's quite, we actually wrote, it's one of the last songs that we wrote that we did in the session. I remember it was the third day, and it was about 11 o'clock at night, and we were all really tired, and Leopold Ross just came up with this riff, and it was like, it's like, oh, that's good, let's do something with that. And it was quite sort of 70s and quite sort of dumb and quite a little bit, almost a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it sort of turned into this sort of like stomping sort of like track, and yeah, you know, yeah, it kind of works. I think it'll be a really good live song, that. Possession is one of my favourite songs on the album. I think it's quite beautiful. I'd like to think it's quite a beautiful song. What's it about? I suppose it was inspired by the idea that no matter how much you love someone, you can never really own them. And I kind of thought there's something that sort of, you know, dawned on me probably very late in life. And I think it's quite a kind of sort of, somehow it feels like a nice closing song for the album. And I like the coda, the part where it goes into the new section at the end. It sort of feels right. Unstoppable. Oh, Unstoppable. That's a weird one because Unstoppable actually on the original, because obviously we're talking about the Japanese version here, and so it's just Unstoppable isn't on the original version. So Unstoppable isn't on the album. Possession actually really finishes the album. Unstoppable is the extra track. So I have to explain that, obviously, because what I said before doesn't make sense otherwise. Yeah, it's a big rock song that was, you know, it's an onomatopoeia. It is what it does. It's supposed to be this sort of like unstoppable groove. Is that on the Japanese version as well? God, I'm having to explain all these songs that are kind of like I thought were B-sides. God, Savage Dance. That was the very last song we did for the album. I remember it was the very, very last song that we actually recorded in the session. I remember it being very late at night and everyone was really tired, and we just suddenly, I think someone just came up with some little part and we just started grooving, and it was this nice, mellow kind of, almost reminded me of Talk Talk or something like that. Well, what can I say? It's always a pleasure to come to Japan, and thank you so much for your loyalty and your love and your devotion and your affection over the years, and I love you back.